From the New York Times Learning Network, we want to welcome you to Teaching Informational Writing with the New York Times. I'm Ross Flatt, Professional Development Manager at the Learning Network. Many of you might read the Times to learn the latest about technological achievements or biological discoveries. Maybe you're just curious about how the world works. Perhaps you've wondered, why do hummingbirds take naps? How exactly do coronavirus vaccines work? Can two robotic spacecrafts land on the moon at once? How do plant roots compete for water? Or maybe you want to know if foods like kiwis affect our sleep patterns. If you click on any of these articles, you'd see that they were written for a general reader. Each one is designed to get our attention and keep it by satisfying our curiosity with important information. And that's what our STEM contest is all about. Creating an engaging, informational writing piece about any issue or question in science, technology, engineering, math, or health. And what better way to prepare your students than with Unit 4 of our writing curriculum, Informational Writing. In this webinar, we're going to talk about both this unit and our STEM contest, two authentic ways to get students reading and writing about the world around us. In this unit, you'll find writing prompts that spark student interest. You'll find a set of mentor texts that showcase different writers' moves that work great with informational writing. And of course, you'll find information about our STEM writing contest. We're going to learn about the STEM writing contest and the resources that support it. We're going to explore writing prompts and resources that will inspire students to investigate topics that matter to them. We'll analyze mentor texts from past student winners to identify writers' moves and key elements of informational writing. And we'll gain advice and best practices from New York Times journalists on informational writing in the field of science. So we can get started with a writing prompt. What is an issue, innovation, or problem in the health, science, technology, engineering, or math fields that interests you? So think for about 30 seconds to a minute, and we'll come right back. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of really interesting responses. I'm excited to come back to these. I'm seeing responses like how the brain handles depression, how long can the teen mind focus, lots actually on teen brain research. I wonder why. Birds and their habits, sustainability. All right, so we have lots of really interesting science topics. Remember this topic. And again, if you're still thinking and writing, please go ahead. But without further ado, I'd like to bring in today's guest. So joining us today is Natalie Prue. Natalie Prue is the senior staff editor at the New York Times Learning Network. We're excited to have Natalie join us again today. Welcome, Natalie.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Ross. I'm so excited to be here and talk with you guys today about informational writing, and hopefully it will be much more engaging than it sounds.
I think it's going to be. I think we got a lot of great things in store. So, Natalie, could you tell us a little bit about this contest? Give us an overview.
Yeah, so in this contest, we invite students to choose an issue or question in science, technology, engineering, math, or health, and then write an engaging 500-word explanation of it. That's it. It's pretty basic. And we have a few basic rules for this contest. The first is we just ask students to choose a topic in STEM that they care about, and it can be anything in any of these fields I just mentioned. The next is to do research and cite their sources. For this contest, we require them to use at least one source from either the New York Times or our partner for this contest, Science News. This contest is open to middle and high school students, and students can write either on their own or in a small group and submit on behalf of the group, but only one submission per student. Their submission must be 500 words or fewer.
Thanks, Natalie. Every single one of our contests has a series of rules, just like every paper that students hand in to teachers is probably graded on some sort of a rubric. What's the rubric for this contest? What are we looking for?
So our contest judges are going to be looking for 4 different things. So one is focus and clarity. We want students to explain a STEM-related topic so that in 500 words or fewer, it is clear to a general reader. That means you're not writing on a huge subject like gravity, but you're really picking something that you can explain fully in 500 words. Also, we're looking for evidence. The essay should provide relevant background information and use valid sources to explain and give context to their topic. And then there should be some sort of analysis. They should explain why the topic matters and how it's relevant to our own lives, a field of study, or the broader world. And then finally, language. We're looking for pieces that have a strong voice and are engaging to read. So there's a lot of room for creativity in this too.
As always, this contest gives students a lot of options. They can really kind of let their imaginations and then their research skills sort of run wild and then come at us with something really interesting. So we've had a lot of this is our second year doing this contest, but last year we had a lot of really interesting entries. So can you talk a little bit, Natalie, about what students can write about?
So there's a lot of opportunity. Students wrote about the bacteria to treat cancer. They wrote about the science of blinking, about sustainable toilets, about the circadian rhythm, about the placebo effect, about marine pollution, and even psychological studies like the Dunning-Kruger effect. So you can see there's a lot of opportunity for students to really choose something they're interested in.
Actually, about several months ago, Natalie, you spoke to a couple of the winners from this contest. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It was so fun to get to hear a little bit more about what it was like for them to participate in the contest and what it felt like to win.
Cool. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at that conversation that Natalie had with 2 of our winners, Alia Fisher from the Bronx High School of Science in the Bronx, New York, and Selena Zhao from North Akani High School in Athens, Georgia. So let's hear what Alia and Selena had to say about their experience doing this contest. Let's take a look and a listen.
I'm Selena Zhao. The title of my article is Tiny in Size but Goliath in Force, the Colonization of Ant-Based Microrobotics.
Circadian Rhythms, the Conductor of Our Body's Symphony by Alia Fisher.
Well, I read the New York Times almost every night, and one day I was just browsing through and I saw the Learning Network, and then just clicking through different links, I found the calendar. But when I saw this contest on the contest calendar, I thought it would be a great idea to incorporate my own ideas and the research of other people into an article of my own creation.
One of my really good friends, she's very interested in music, but she does not like science or math or anything like that. So I found it really interesting that, while we're best friends, we're not really able to engage with each other about the things that we're really interested in. For me, it's science. For her, it's music. So that's really what inspired me to write this piece.
When I was researching, I went through different articles, and a lot of them had citations at the bottom, different citations they used, and just going through a chain of those was my main strategy towards researching it.
I first kind of looked at more secondary sources like articles in newspapers or magazines, and also the New York Times. I looked on PubMed for stuff about circadian rhythms.
After I started reading the works of the other winners, I was really blown away by everyone's imagination. It's such a good feeling to be recognized for something I love doing, and I think that was a really cool part of this.
Natalie, why don't we talk a little bit about how students can get started? So I'm a student, I want to enter this contest. What should be my first step?
The first thing that I would do is to just start looking at the world around you and asking questions about it. So we have a writing prompt that can guide students through that process, and it asks, what questions do you have about the way the world works? So it gives a couple of examples. So for instance, maybe students want to explore something that will improve their lives, like what happens to my brain if I ditch my phone for a bit? Or maybe they want to investigate an issue that's relevant to their school or their community, such as vaping-related illnesses, or how coronavirus affects teens specifically. Or maybe they're interested in more ethical questions like racial bias in AI or privacy breaches in facial recognition technology. All of these things are up for grabs in this contest and in this unit. So the writing prompt links to some great Times reporting on all kinds of STEM related topics so that students can sort of start to see how journalists ask and answer these questions in their reporting. And then it offers some exercises for coming up with questions that interest them. Another resource that I'll point you to is the Good Question column by Randall Monroe. He invites readers to ask their strangest, wildest, most out there questions about the world and their lives, and then he answers them via research and comic illustrations. So you can see here some of the questions he's answered so far are: will my popcorn explode? What makes sand soft? How hot is too hot? These are all questions that might get students thinking about those little things in their lives that they've always wondered about, but they haven't had time to research, and that can be a great entry into this contest too.
Yeah, that's a really good resource to check out. And it kind of seems, based on last year's winning submissions, some students sort of went in that direction. Like the one student talked about how people who have sleep apnea might also have fat tongues, which is so specific and so interesting. That's a really great place to start. So clearly, figuring out the type of topic that you want to research is going to be really important. Now, at the New York Times, we have journalists who do this all of the time. One of them is Catherine Wu. And Catherine Wu is a science and health reporter for the New York Times. I spoke with her about how she selects particular topics when she's about to write an article. Let's take a look and a listen.
My name is Catherine Wu, and I am a science and health reporter at the New York Times. In December, I wrote a piece titled "Menaced by Murder Hornets, Bees Decorate Their Hives with Feces." Really, part of the reason I chose this story to write about was because the story behind the paper was so fun. These researchers were doing field work in Vietnam, and local beekeepers were telling them, we are seeing some really weird stuff on the bee colonies and beehives. We think it might be poop, and it's not bee poop. So immediately someone had to look into this. So I thought it would just be this incredibly fun story writing about why honeybees were going around collecting the feces of other animals and smearing it on their houses. You don't do that unless you have a pretty good reason. And the study basically went into that reason.
Okay, so for those of you who are new to the Learning Network, you probably didn't expect that this is the question we'd be exploring today. Why are bees smearing the feces of other animals on their hives? And again, if you are interested in finding out more, you can check out Catherine's article. We're going to hear from Catherine a little bit later. Natalie, is there anything that you want to say based on what Catherine was talking about?
I mean, I think exactly what she talked about is what we hope that students will do, sort of start to look around their lives and their world and ask questions and say, why are bees smearing poop on this? Or why am I seeing this or that? And that can be their entry to inquiry to this writing assignment.
A little bit ago, I asked everybody to identify some topics that interested you. So I saw a lot of really great ones. I saw something on why are pandas so calm? Teens and anxiety, impact of exercise on disease treatment. Really, really interesting topic. So taking that topic that you identified, we'd like you to do this next interactive. Generate a question that would lead to inquiry on the topic you previously identified. Natalie, I'm seeing a ton of really interesting questions here. Let's see if people are sort of getting the hang of this. I saw somebody who asked about chickens and the grieving process. Yeah. Somebody asked, how is gluten ruining our health? Anything you saw?
Why do we act the way we do? Which that might be pretty broad, but it could lead to some more specific things. Can we live on the moon? That's a good question. I'm sure people are actually asking that right now.
That was a really good one. Do squirrels have territory issues? That's a really interesting one. I know that I have questions about that because I have squirrels everywhere in my neighborhood. All right. So these are the types of questions that we want students to get at, right? Something that starts to really narrow down and becomes really the focus of the entry that they'd be bringing into this contest, right?
Exactly. These are just what we're looking for.
All right. So once we have that question, we're going to do some research. So can you talk to us about how we'd suggest students go about doing that research?
Yeah, so once you have your question, you can start that inquiry process looking at what has been written about it. Times or our partners, Science News or Science News for Students. It might just be a good place to find out some basics about your question or about the topic you're interested in. And like I said, if students are submitting their piece to our contest, they have to use at least one source from one of these publications. And then next, they might dig deeper into scientific journals. So in that video earlier, you heard Selena and Alia both mention looking at PubMed, looking at footnotes and links to dig deeper into sort of the more scientific writing about their topics. You can also interview experts, and it doesn't have to be experts, but it can be experts in their own community. So for example, students don't have to call up the head of the U.S. Forest Service to find out about butterfly habitats. They can actually talk to a local park ranger or a gardener, somebody who has a lot of expertise in the area that they're interested in. And then finally, another option is for them to actually conduct their own investigations or experiments. Last year, one of our finalists wrote about why we're so attracted to spicy foods. And she used her family as test subjects to rate the spiciness level and tastiness level of different kinds of foods, which was a really fun experiment to read about.
All right. So I could really imagine students having fun with this. For interviewing experts, that's actually something when I spoke to Catherine, that's really the direction that a lot of journalists tend to go in. But like Natalie said, we know that that might not always be available to you. So there's lots of different options that students can have for researching. So let's get into the next step. So we have our question, we've done some research. Now we got to get to the writing. Where should I start when I want to begin writing this essay?
So the first thing you might do is look at examples of great informational writing. Across the Times, of course, you'll find hundreds, thousands actually, of articles in this genre. That's what we do. But that's entirely too much for you to sort through as teachers. We know that you're busy. So we've gathered up some of the best and most kid-friendly pieces in our mentor text column. And in this feature, we have several different types of resources that all aim to demystify the writing process via examples that students can learn from and then emulate. So one of those types of resources is our annotated by the author text. In this feature, we invite journalists and past winners of our contest to annotate their work, explaining the writing choices that they made and why they made them. So what you're looking at here is an example from Nicholas St. Fleur. He's a science writer and contributor to the Science Times. And you'll see right here that his original article is reproduced, and then he writes comments on each paragraph explaining his writing and his research process. We're going to learn more from him later and hear about this article specifically, but this is one place that you can start with students. Another thing that we have are mentor text lesson plans. These explore essential elements of different genres, and these lessons invite students to analyze this specific element in Times articles and then try it for themselves. So for our informational writing unit, we look at 3 key elements. And the first of those is hooking the reader right from the start. Another one is explaining why the topic matters. And then lastly, we have quoting and paraphrasing experts in research. So you'll see hooking reader right from the start. We have a lesson plan that helps students learn how to do that with examples from the Times Trilobites column. We have another lesson that helps students explain why something matters using examples from the Times Personal Health column. And then we have another lesson about quoting and paraphrasing experts in research using examples from the Times Tip column. And throughout this webinar, we're going to get a chance to take a closer look at each of these three different elements.
Okay, perfect. So lots of different resources that we can do here. Okay, perfect. So lots of different resources that we can do here. You mentioned Nick St. Fleur. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to meet him first as we talk about hooking the reader right from the start. So I spoke with Nicholas St. Fleur recently about how he approaches hooking a reader right from the start, and he's going to talk about how he does that right now. So let's take a look and a listen, and then we'll discuss.
Hi there, I'm Nick St. Fleur. I am a science reporter and a contributor to the Science Times. Today we'll be talking about Tiny Tyrannosaur hints at how T-Rex became king. For me, sometimes it can be a challenge doing the beginnings of my articles. This portion is known as the lead. For a journalist, the lead is very important because you need to hook your reader, but you also need to hook your editor as well. So a good lead goes a long way. When I come to doing my lead, I tend to try to be a little artistic with my words here. A tool I like to use is alliteration. So the repetition of certain, letters, sounds. In this particular case, I liked the R, the Rex in T-Rex, and I use that as, I call them regal, because, they're kind of like the king of dinosaurs. So the regal T-Rex. And then I went on to say that they were relegated. So that's a kind of a bigger word, but it really works in here in the idea that they were, relegated to the second-class predators. But I loved the repetition of regal, Rex, and relegate. And I feel it makes it more fun for people to read. And in all honesty, it makes it more fun for me to write.
Nick St. Fleur talking about how he hooks readers. He is so much fun to talk to. Natalie, is there anything that you'd like to add or comment on what Nicholas said?
I mean, I'll just say that I love reading the first paragraph of students' essays because this is where you can really stretch your creativity. Like he said, you can have so much fun with it, with different metaphors, with alliteration. So we read some excellent ones last year. I'm excited to see what we get this year, but this is the most important line in your piece because you really have to hook your reader with something interesting and fun.
All right, so let's see how a student approached this in her contest. So we're going to take a look at Selena Zhao's winning essay from last year, Tiny in Size but Goliath in Force, the colonization of ant-based micro-robotics. What we're going to do here is we're going to listen to Selena reading an excerpt from her essay, and you can follow along. And as you're listening and reading along, see if you can tell how does she hook the reader in this, and we'll talk about that when we get back.
Imagine climbing a skyscraper, but while lugging an elephant, or with a team of 5 others lifting the weight of the Eiffel Tower and 3 statues of Liberty. As Sisyphean as it sounds, functional equivalents of these incredible feats have already been accomplished by ant-inspired micro-robots, and these examples are only the tip of the anthill.
A really short excerpt from Selena's essay. We'll come back to this excerpt in just a second, but we do want to ask the next interactive, which is, what words or phrases in Selena's essay hooked you as a reader? I'm going to put Selena's essay back up on screen, and you can take the next 30 seconds or so to share. Natalie, I'm seeing a lot of things that people are pulling from Selena's essay. What do you notice?
Yeah, this is so interesting. People are calling out a couple themes. One is everybody loves that line, tip of the anthill. It's so cute, such a perfect ending to that first paragraph. Another is that really strong imagery of picturing lugging an elephant up the Eiffel Tower. this word Sisyphean, very sophisticated, but it really does grab your attention. And then a lot of people are pointing out how she says imagine in the beginning, sort of getting the reader to picture something in their head and think about what she's trying to say. And I think she does two things here that are really important. One, she gets our attention with all those things that people pointed out, but she also tells us what this essay is about. It's about ant-inspired micro robots. So she does those two things effortlessly in this first paragraph, I think.
Yeah, she has a really good lead, as Nicholas said in here. Now that we've hooked our reader, we also need to let them know why is this important. So let's talk a little bit about how a student can explain why the topic they're writing about matters to the reader. Nicholas talked to me a little bit more about how he explains why a topic matters. So let's take another look and a listen.
So people may be wondering, why should I care about this science? Why is it important? Sure, I've heard about T-Rexes. It's kind of cool that there are tiny ones, but what does that mean for me? And that's a challenge that science reporters always face. How do you make the science, interesting to your reader? What I like to do with my stories is kind of get the reader to think about the bigger picture here. In this story, I'm giving the example of the T-Rex, how, its ancestors went from small to really big. But it doesn't just have to be size. It could be intelligence. It can be, whether it be like, muscles, whether it be, the ability to fly. These are all different types of abilities that have happened to different types of lineages of animals and creatures that have walked the planet. And I think it kind of gets people thinking, wow, where will humans be millions of years from now? And I just think that sparking that curiosity is what makes these stories important. And that's our job as journalists, especially as science journalists, communicating to the public.
Okay, so once again, Nicholas St. Fleur on explaining why the topic matters. Natalie, anything that he said that you want to highlight or add to?
I mean, I think this is just the next most important thing after the lead, after that first paragraph, is explaining why it matters. Your reader wants to know, okay, so why should I care? What does this mean for my life? What does this mean for the world? And I think his explanation of that is spot on.
I agree. And it's very clear that that's something he really strives for in every one of his articles. Let's see how Selena explains to the reader why this topic is important.
As the ants keep marching on, dominating as a massive superorganism that has colonized nearly every landmass on Earth, researchers are increasingly turning towards ants as inspiration for biomimicry-based robots. An army of ants boasts the ideal physical anatomy and biological organization for transforming the capabilities of microrobots in the real world, from leading in search and rescue missions to mapping previously unexplored terrain on Earth and in space.
Okay, so once again, Selena Zhao is reading from her essay about ants and microrobotics. So we'll come back to this excerpt in a second, but we'd like you to do another interactive. And that interactive is, according to Selena, why does this topic matter? Okay, we're seeing a lot come in right now. I'm seeing search and rescue as an application. What do you see?
Yeah, I think she sort of explains in this paragraph, why should we care about ants and their anatomy? And people are pointing out, well, they're inspiration for micro robots. And what do these micro robots do for us? People are pointing out search and rescue missions. They can lead to advances in technology. They can help map terrain that we've never explored before. There's possibilities for use in our own lives, Tanya points out. And that's really what brings it home, I think.
So let's move on. We're going to move on to our next topic. And this is actually the third element that we discussed. And this is quoting and paraphrasing experts and research. We spoke again with Catherine Wu, and Catherine talked with me about how she directly quotes different researchers as she's working with them. Let's take another look and a listen.
I think deciding when to quote experts versus paraphrase them can always be tough because your goal is always to serve your reader. And so I'm always thinking, what's going to be the clearest way and often most concise way for me to convey something? My favorite quotes in this piece weren't necessarily about like, well, this is a definition of this, or this is how I'm explaining this. It was sort of adding to the excitement of the piece, how weird this was, and why people should care about it. And I feel like I'm never as good as talking about that as someone who is working on this or has that sort of expert eye for these kinds of things. So, I mean, one of my favorite quotes from this piece actually came from a bee expert who's at Providence College named Rachel Benoan. And I just really loved how she put this. You know, the whole point of this study is about these like adorable little honeybees flying around and gathering poop to smear it on their houses. And she said, we think of bees visiting pretty flowers and collecting sweet nectar. This is the complete antithesis to that, which I just loved. It was a really great encapsulation. Like if you see bees are gathering other animals' poop, read on to figure out why. There's some like dissonance in your head about that. And I feel like she captured it really perfectly. And she said it far better than I could have as the journalist. And I think when you notice that, that's the perfect time to have a quote in your piece, a direct quote in your piece.
Okay, so Catherine is talking about how she actually takes all of these quotes when she's researching or interviewing folks and how she uses that. So anything you want to add to what Catherine had to say about this?
I mean, I think she said that I think it's a really important balance to strike is paraphrasing the research that you're doing, but also quoting when appropriate. You don't want your whole paper to be all quotes from experts, and you don't want it to be all paraphrased. I think there's a nice balance that you can strike that she was talking about.
Yeah, and her comment on, you know, when somebody can say it better than she can say it, quote them. And when she can just kind of sum it up, she sums it up. All right. So we're gonna have one more clip from Catherine, and this is where Catherine sort of talks about all of the information she gathers on a topic and how she uses that. So let's take a look at how she does that.
When you're dealing with a really tricky topic, I think there's often this impulse to like over explain or cram everything into a piece, especially when it's about science and you're writing about like one teeny tiny aspect of climate change or one teeny tiny aspect of like, I don't know, a gene therapy or something. And it's really tempting to put like all the knowledge about all the genetics or all the earth science into your piece. I try and work backwards. I think, okay, at the end of this piece, what do I want my reader to understand about the subject at hand? Maybe it's that such and such glacier is melting at a pace faster than anticipated. How do I work backwards from that? For my reader to understand why that matters, what do they need to know? They probably need to know like how quickly that glacier melts normally, how quickly it's melting now. They don't necessarily need to know the number of penguins that visit that glacier, unless that just happens to be like the way the researcher found it or something. I try to make sure that I'm giving the reader the bare amount of information to understand the subject and care about the subject, and then I'm done. And usually that can actually be done in just a few hundred words.
Okay, so again, this is Catherine talking about how she incorporates information. Natalie, what do you think about this?
I mean, I think she touched on something that we're so familiar with as teachers and curriculum writers, and that's working backwards, starting with your end goal in mind. What do you want your reader to understand? And just picking those pieces of information that are most relevant to that. I think it's such a piece of golden advice that we can use for any kind of writing, but especially informational writing. And I think she hits on one more thing that's important if you're submitting to this contest is picking a topic narrow enough that you can do it justice in 500 words. And you're only picking those things that are most relevant because you have that word limit.
That's a really good point about making sure the topic is really narrow. So speaking of narrow topics, we're going to go right back to Selena's essay to see how she did this towards the end of her winning essay about ants and microrobotics. And as you look at this, think how she's using quotes, how she's using a lot of research. You're going to see a lot of examples, and then we'll talk about it. Let's take a look.
When a combination of these abilities is applied to swarm robotics, the results are impressive. Microtug robots created at Stanford University are one example. They made headlines when a team of 6, weighing just 3.5 ounces together, pulled a car weighing 3,900 pounds. Synchronizing the bots' movements so that each used 3 of their 6 legs, much like how ants cooperate in real life, made this act possible. Tribots, an invention of Switzerland's École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, EPFL, and Osaka University are another instance. Based on chop-jaw ants, division of labor and leadership is a core component of Tribot. So, if one robot fails, the system of fault tolerance means that the success of the mission won't be adversely affected. Both Microtug and Tribot robots hold immense potential in emergency relief and exploration and navigation missions. Just like insects, small robots can be powerful, says Jamie Paik, lead researcher at EPFL, echoing a growing sentiment among the research world.
Selena includes a ton of information, as you can see right here. So for your final interactive, we'd like you to tell us, what did you notice about the way Selena cites research and experts in the paragraph that we saw? So take about 30 seconds. I'll put the essay back up and we'll share your responses.
So I'm seeing a lot of different things people are bringing up in this. People are saying she paraphrases some of the research that she did. She uses that nice quote at the end from the lead researcher, Jamie Pollock. You can tell she understands the topic. She gives really specific examples to back up her original claim about ant-inspired microrobotics. And she's blending the research into her own ideas. And this is an important part of writing, and particularly for this contest, I'll just say that we do require a works cited for students to cite the research that they use, but we encourage them to actually write it like an article and not necessarily like an academic paper. So what that means is we encourage them not to use in-text citations or footnotes, because that's not what you see in an article in the New York Times, for example, but instead to sort of seamlessly incorporate where they got the research from into their piece, exactly how Selena does. And people noted it really makes it read well, and it just flows really nicely.
Yeah, I agree. And that is very hard to do, whether you're writing about science, whether you're writing about history, to use quotes in a way that don't seem like you're overusing them, and to get really complicated information in a way that's digestible for the average person. She did a great job here. Let's take a look at what we covered in this webinar. We outlined 5 steps for writing a great informational writing piece for our STEM contest. So first is to generate a question that you can explore, something that can be explored in 500 words or less. And remember to check out our Learning Network writing prompts and Randall Munroe's Good Questions article for some great ideas. Now, once you know what to explore, it's time to do some research. Remember to use at least one source from the New York Times, Science News, or Science News for Students. And you can also explore scientific journals, interview experts, or conduct your own experiments. When you're ready to start writing, don't forget to check out some of our mentor texts. You can read last year's winning submissions or check out articles from our Times Science writers. And remember that as you write, it's really important to engage your reader with key informational writer's moves. Hook your reader, explain why your topic matters, and quote and paraphrase your sources. And once you've done all that, submit to our contest. Winning submissions will be published on the New York Times Learning Network, which means that students and teachers around the world will have the chance to read your work. So, Natalie, are there any final pieces of advice that you might want to add here for our teachers?
One is to let students choose a topic that interests them. Like we've covered today, there are so many possibilities, and a lot of our student winners have told us over and over again that them getting to choose their own topic and something that they are really interested in, that's what sustains them through the research process and the writing process. they should make sure that they choose a topic that they can do justice, that they can cover fully in 500 words. So just make sure that it's narrow enough to write about it in just a few paragraphs. And then finally, one more thing I'll just say about information writing is that there's so much room for creativity in informational writing, like you've seen today. We encourage students to have fun with this, to use metaphors, analogies, imagery. Not only do these things make the writing engaging and fun to read, but they actually help readers understand these kind of complex concepts better because they can relate it to their own lives and their own experiences. So I hope that you can have fun teaching this and students can have fun with this assignment.
Absolutely. So we're excited for you all to maybe go through these units and have your students enter this contest. So Natalie, I just want to thank you one more time for joining us, telling us about the contest, giving us all these resources. We love having you here as always. So thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. And we'd also like to thank Catherine Wu. We'd like to thank Nicholas St. Fleur. We'd like to thank Alia Fisher and Selena Zhang for sharing their work with us as well. This webinar was produced by myself, by Rachel Manley, by Callie Holterman, and from everybody else at the Learning Network. I'm Ross Flatt. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.